Hi, everyone. It's Lindsey Baker. We're on Action Hour on on UnChained TV. And I have with me Carol Walker, who just got back from 3 weeks at the Wyoming Roundups. Carol, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being on. I can't wait to dig into the story with you, but for the people that are not aware of this, that we want to make aware, let's go ahead and play a couple of news clips that you were interviewed.
2 years ago, the Bureau of Land Management, the other BLM, set up an incentive program to encourage people to adopt Mustangs and Burros and give them a good home. It was expensive, but a good idea. Thousands of people signed up for it. Now we're learning that many of those horses wound up in slaughterhouses and many more are on their way there. How'd that happen? Carol Walker is a horse photographer and an advocate for horses, and we're happy to have her on tonight. Carol, thanks so much for coming on. So a program designed to save wild horses is instead sending them to the slaughterhouse. How does this happen?
Well, it's not really designed to save wild horses. It's a way for the Bureau of Land Management to launder them, basically to get them out, get rid of them, and not be responsible for sending them to slaughter. At the time that they set this program up in 2019, I was horrified because I knew what was going to happen. And what happens is people will take the horses, they'll get their money, and then their $1,000, and then they take them to auctions and get another, say, $500 for them, and the horses go to slaughter. And it's very inhumane, and it's a terrible solution. It's not a solution. What we need is for people to stop. We need the Bureau of Land Management to stop rounding up wild horses, to manage them on our federal public lands humanely, and use birth control instead of rounding them up and removing them and then stockpiling them. $70 million the BLM spent last year warehousing the wild horses. This is 70% of their budget. And they just got an extra $35 million in their budget for roundups and warehousing horses. And they're planning to take over 90,000 horses over the next 5 years and stockpile them. Instead of saying, well, gee, it would be much cheaper to manage the horses where they belong on our public lands and much more humane. These horses live in families. There are stallions, mares, and youngsters. And sometimes the stallions and mares have been together for over a decade. And they have real bonds and they're families.
Wow. So that gives people a little bit of the background. But now you have been at the most current roundup. So what can you tell us about what's going on, and how does the stockpiling relate to the latest roundups?
So currently there are over 60,000 wild horses in holding facilities. And it's becoming, with the roundups currently, there's going to be more than that by the time they finish this roundup in Wyoming, supposed to be in February. They have removed so far 3,121 horses from their homes in 3 herds in southwestern Wyoming: Adobe Town, Great Divide Basin, and Salt Wells Creek. And the herds are on 3 million acres. It's really hard when you live in a city to conceive of that much land and to say that there are too many horses when there are only 4,500 horses on that land. So most of this is going to be, there's 2 more herds that are being rounded up, that it's going to be in July and February. And at the end of it, 4,500 horses will have been removed, and over 300 will have been returned, leaving only 1,500 horses on 3.5 million acres, which is half of Wyoming's wild horses. And it's not like these horses all get adopted. And even if they are adopted, they don't necessarily end up at a good home. So they're stockpiled. Probably half of the holding facilities are feedlots. They're basically just pens that the horses are separated by sex. And so the mares are together. The stallions ended up being gelded. They're together. And then the babies are together. So all the families are separated from each other. and they're in these pens.
Stop you right there just for a second and ask about that. You just mentioned that the stallions are gelded, and that is a very traumatic experience on top of a horrendously traumatic experience. What is the method that you happen to know? I mean, what do they exactly go through when they do that? If you could,
They will put them in a squeeze chute, which squeezes them so they can't move. And then the veterinarian will go in there, and I'm not sure, they probably use a sedative, and then they castrate the stallions. So even worse than gelding stallions actually is this Roundup. They are for the first time using IUDs in wild mares, and they're actually having to surgically insert them. The holding facilities are filthy. I mean, if you see a holding facility, it's just, you know, kind of mud, manure, urine. It's not sterile by any standards, and no way in shape or form should they be doing surgery on wild horses. So they're putting these IUDs in these wild mares, and this is a very untested procedure that the Oklahoma State University got a grant to do this. So they did it with 7 mares that they're releasing on Monday. They kept them for 2 weeks, and then 31 more mares from Adobe Town are going to be receiving these IUDs. They're not tracking them on the range. They're just turning them out there, and if something happens to them, they'll get infections and die. And when they're
responsible.
Yeah, and they're saying that this is a temporary method of birth control. And I said, well, temporary, how is that temporary? They insert the IUDs and then turn the mares loose. So they said, oh yeah, they'll just fall out after 2 years.
They hope.
They hope, right. And so they're basically torturing these wild mares for no good reason.
Well, just think of a woman going to a doctor, having an IUD put in, and then going off, and the doctor said, that'll fall out eventually, no worries. I mean, it's insane. That's not even, again, they're not following proper science, medicine, etc. Can we talk just for a moment about the budget? Because you just mentioned it again with this new initiative with the IUDs for the females. How much did I hear you say 70 million budget in that video, or did I not hear correctly?
How much the BLM budget
you had said that the budget that they have for the wild horses to keep them in the pens in holding is 70 million a year. Is that right?
Yep. And it's I believe it's 2/3 to 3/4 of the BLM's entire budget. So the budget is going to warehousing the horses and rounding them up instead of doing anything like research or improving the range or birth control. And birth control works. They are using PZP, which is a 2-year birth control on most of the mares that they're releasing. And it works. And it doesn't kill the horses, and it isn't dangerous, and they don't have to put them under. And it works, but the BLM would rather round up and remove these horses than use birth control to control their numbers.
And, let's watch another clip again, because you explained it really well, and then we'll get into it. We'll dig deeper. I'll play the second half.
And to rip them apart, to rip the families apart and stick them in holding facilities is the most insanely cruel thing that can be done to these horses. Right now, there are 12. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I mean, of all the things going on in this country that need fixing, is there some reason we need to bother the wild horses in the first place? If they're on federal, we have vast reserves of federal land. We do have a lot of that. Why are we hassling the wild horses? Do you know?
Because the livestock industry has a huge amount of power and money, and they want all the horses gone. They want the horses removed from public lands. They don't want to share. And even though right now we have livestock grazing on 155 million acres and wild horses are only on 27 million acres, they want them all gone. And so this is why this whole cycle has been set up. And there are currently 1,200 horses at Canyon City, Colorado that were rounded up last year that the public has not even been able to see or adopt, even though we have been trying really hard. The excuse has been COVID. But if you want horses to find good homes, you would want to make them available to people.
Yeah, you
And
would.
I'm just horrified that this plan is a continuation of the same old thing that the Bureau of Land Management is doing, which is rounding up and warehousing these horses. It's not right. It's not good for the horses. It's not good for the American people who love wild horses.
Of course. I mean,
I spend hundreds of hours each year with them, and it's tremendous. It's wonderful to be able to spend time with them.
I believe you. I think it's okay to have wild horses on public land. It sounds like a good thing to me. Carol, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you. I think most people weren't even aware that was happening.
Thank you.
Carol, I have a question for you. The reason that this is the way it is in with the elk at Point Reyes, follow me for a second. It's the same sort of situation where they're pushing the elk out, they're making them die of thirst and hunger, they're fencing them off for cattle ranching. Is it because they have like a sweet, as some of the people I was interviewing say, a sweet deal with the government where they're paying very low rent for that land and things like that? Can you just address that? Why, if they're, as he said in the video, there's a lot of federal land, there's a lot of land, why are they pushing out the horses?
Right. The major reason is livestock grazing. So the ranchers that have leases on BLM land for livestock grazing pay $1.35 per cow-calf pair to graze per month. And the going rate, if you were going to lease private land, is about $20. So we call them welfare ranchers. And the BLM loses millions of dollars every year on this program. It's an absurd program. And the Wyoming Roundup is happening because of this. The Rock Springs Grazing Association, which is in southwestern Wyoming, is the most powerful grazing association in the country. There's only 24 families. They have a lock on all of this land because they're in the checkerboard. So in the 1870s, when the railroad went through to fund it, they sold off 1 mile square blocks. And there's a 20-mile wide area called the checkerboard. So these ranchers own the private parts and they lease the government parts. And so they have a lock on this whole area. And they want all of the horses gone from this area. And I have been involved with American Wild Horse Campaign on lawsuits, probably 7 lawsuits since 2011, trying to keep the horses out there.
And we have to invite them on at any time to give their side of the story on this issue. We have to invite the cattle ranchers on at any time, and any particular, we try not to name particular families. We know there's a lot, it's a very complex issue, but this is not a new issue for us. We've heard this, and it's about a lot of different wild animals, not just horses. And also, we haven't even touched on this part, but we probably will a little, what it does to the land. Let's watch the other news story that you did, and we'll get into it. By the way, I hear an echo, so I'm going to mute myself when you're talking. If you could do the same, I think we'll have a better sound.
Okay.
Thank you. Here, let's play this.
Hold on, let me get in here.
Before, these horses lived near Longmont.
And I got him when he was just 9 months old, and he's now 11.
They lived in the wild of Wyoming.
I know.
Now they live with Carol Walker, who adopted them after what she calls brutal roundups by the Bureau of Land Management.
I was at the last helicopter roundup in 2008 that they did there, and 11 horses died.
The horses are important. The sage grouse is important. The antelope are important. We need to make sure there's plenty of food in the kitchen for all of them.
Bruce Silito manages the BLM office, which oversees horses in the San Wash Basin west of Craig, Colorado.
We follow very stringent safety requirements. We take very good care of those horses. We make sure the foals are separated so they don't get trampled.
He says drought conditions require the removal of about 730 wild horses, which will be adopted out to the public, about 82% of the herd.
And so it's very important to not only have healthy horses, but it's very important to have healthy rangeland.
These horses are not dying. I was there 3 weeks ago. Things had gotten pretty sparse during the summer, But then the rains came.
Walker says she took these pictures 3 weeks ago of healthy horses drinking at watering holes. She believes the real reason the BLM wants to remove the wild horses is to allow ranchers to let their sheep graze and drink on the same land.
And to put livestock out when there's supposedly a drought emergency is crazy.
Silito says the livestock only uses about 4% of the water and vegetation in the Sandwash Basin.
The other 95% of the resources are used by horses. We have data on that. It shows clearly that the horses are using the abundance of the resources.
And he's 13, and I've had him for 11 years.
Walker doesn't believe it. And while she loves her horses,
But you know what? I would rather he had grown up in the wild, where he belonged.
just like the wild horses in the Sandwash Basin. Nelson Garcia, 9 News.
Wow. So is that true? What about that claim that the livestock only use a small percentage and the horses are using all the resources?
Well, that's Sandwash Basin in Colorado. And interestingly, shortly after the Roundup, thousands of sheep descended upon Sandwash Basin. And they did not cut back the sheep usage of the basin at all this year while claiming drought. So no, it's not true that they only use 4%. When the sheep are there, they're using all the available water holes that they can get to.
Right. That would only make sense.
Oops, sorry.
Did I lose you there for a moment? Yeah, this just seems like so much misinformation to the public. And let's talk about a little bit of a call to action. When we're 15 minutes in, I like to do that. So let's talk about what people can do. And then we're going to go through some of your amazing images. So people stay tuned, as well as your comments. We want to get to those. So what you can do is donate. And that is, let me see if I can share a screen here.
That's for the legal fund for to stop the adoption incentive program, which is sending wild horses to slaughter. This is donating to the legal fund for a lawsuit to stop that. I'm a plaintiff on that. An American Wild Horse Campaign and several sanctuaries are bringing this lawsuit to stop it, because what's happening is wild horses are ending up at slaughter because people are being given $1,000 to adopt a wild horse. And the unscrupulous people, I'm not saying everyone is, are when they finally receive their $1,000, then they take the horse to auction. They get another $500 from the slaughter auction, and the horses end up at auction. And what's happening is sanctuaries are finding these horses that are dumped and saving their lives by taking them in. And there aren't enough sanctuaries to take all of the horses that this is happening to. And it's a horrific thing. This one family made $22,000 doing this, and it needs to be stopped. It's
$22,000
in a year. Yes.
Wow. In a year.
Yes. It's very shocking, and it is not to the horse's benefit. The BLM will tell you, oh, they'll use it for training or board. No, they will take that money and then dump the horses. So we're saying when they started the adoption incentive program in 2019, when we first heard about it, we said, this is horrible. This is what's going to happen. These horses are going to end up at slaughter. And Congress has expressly forbidden using funds which will end up having the horses mistreated or sent to slaughter. So it's actually against the law.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So we're involved in a lawsuit to stop that. And what also needs to happen is the roundups need to stop. We were very hopeful when Secretary Holland became the Secretary of the Interior that there would be a change and that we would be able to stop the roundups for at least 6 months, have discussions, find out a different way, another path to take for these wild horses. And she has been completely unresponsive to all of us, has not met with any groups, has not met with any people. It's the plans that the BLM had under the Trump administration have continued unchecked, unstopped, unchanged. And it has been heartbreaking. And they are trying to round up, I think this year it's going to be almost 20,000 horses rounded up and removed, and plans for 20,000 more next year. And it's a horrible life for a wild horse if they get to continue to live. You know, many of these horses are killed at the roundups. We've had 16 die in Wyoming so far. Mares and stallions slamming into panels and breaking their necks. And then in the holding facilities, usually you have maybe 100 horses die in the first few months. These wild horses are not meant to be in these facilities. And then if someone adopts them and is unscrupulous and dumps them at slaughter, then the horses end up dying as well. So there is no way that this is a good plan for these wild horses. I believe they need to be managed on our public lands where they belong with their families. And if you need to contain their numbers, then use birth control, and use birth control that doesn't sterilize them forever, but that is reversible, because 150 wild horses is the minimum number of adults that need to be in a herd to keep genetic viability. And so if the herd drops below that, you need to be able to step back with a birth control so the herd doesn't get wiped out.
Right. Well, we're getting a lot of comments here. Let me just remove the photo here. Let's see what people are saying. A lot of people in support of course, you know, not rounding the horses up. And this lady is saying, need horses, no horses eat less than sheep and cows. Do this. I can't, it's very small, but she says, we all need to go vegan. I agree with that comment. So I think that would make a huge difference, because cattle ranching is a huge part of this. Also, let's see a couple of others. No horses eat less than sheep. Same one. Sorry about that. Another comment. Oh my goodness. This is disgusting. Horses, elks, etc. deserve better. And we do see it happening to all different animals. Where's the petition? We are going to put the petition up. It's actually, the URL is a little bit complicated. While we're talking, I will try to put it up while Carol's talking, but it will definitely be in there at the top of this post right after the show. As soon as we go off the air, wait a couple seconds, it'll be up there, okay? And we do appreciate you going and signing that petition. If you can, donate to this lawsuit. The lawsuit is we need people to come forward and help support the people that are doing this, because they don't have the resources that the cattle ranchers and the lobbyists. These are very wealthy individuals that have lobbyists. These individuals that are taking this on don't have those resources. So they're depending upon us, the public. So if you can, in the holiday season, see it in your heart to make a donation, you can go to this link. I set up a tinyurl.com, and then you just need to jot down those 4 numbers very quickly, or 5, 6, 7 numbers there. Sorry, I didn't count them previously. But anyway, Carol, back to talking about it. What have we not covered that's important to talk about right now?
Okay, so I also want to make sure that people understand the livestock grazing. 85% of this is corporate ranching, and some of these livestock grazers that are owned by some of the wealthiest people in the country. So this is not mom and pop ranchers. This is big corporate wealth. And also only 3% of the cattle that are used for food in this country come from our public lands. So I believe strongly that livestock grazing leases should be rescinded, and in the areas where wild horses are. Wild horses are supposed to be the principal species in the areas where they are found. That is part of the 1971 Wild Horse and Burro Act. And they are not. They are getting shoved to a very small percentage of use of the acreage that they are on. And many of these herds are being zeroed out. So in Wyoming, the Roundup is going on and they're taking 80% of the horses. But the bad thing is they're working on a new land use plan to zero out 3 of these herds completely. No more horses in those areas. And
now, let me just stop you there. Is that a public record? Because I've not heard that before. And what is if it is public record, what has been the response to obviously people protesting?
so I actually wrote comments on this plan, that it is the resource management plan for Rawlins and Rock Springs area. And they are in the midst of revising it. They've been working on revising it since 2013. The sage grouse, when they were talking about listing the sage grouse as endangered, they had a halt to the land use plan, but they are working on it again now. And the part of it, the wild horse portion, was to zero out 3 herds and to just about sterilize a 4th herd. And yes, it is a matter of public record. The BLM is working on this right now for Wyoming. And we don't know, when I was asking at the Roundup, when you're at the Roundup, one of the things is you get access to BLM staff and you get to ask questions about what they're doing. And this is very valuable. This is almost as valuable as actually observing the Roundup itself. And when I asked about this, they said, no comment. When is the land use plan? When is the preliminary going to be released? No comment, no comment. They refuse to say how soon this is going to happen. So we are thinking it is going to be pretty soon.
Pretty soon, and it's going to be like in the dark of the night or some sort of.
No, people will have an opportunity to comment. That will happen. And we will probably end up, most likely, with a lawsuit against it.
Okay, so this is going to be something you're going to be fighting, thankfully. And how can people get involved to help? Those 2 resources we showed?
Yes.
The donate resource?
Follow American Wild Horse Campaign. They're the ones that are going to be spearheading the lawsuit against this.
Fantastic. Good to know. So if you didn't hear that, follow American Horse Campaign. We actually had them on not too long ago. So as I said, I've been covering this story for a while. Yes. My viewers know about it. Let's see if we got a couple more comments here. Saying here, horrible cattle that have been destroying the planet, expelling methane. Oh, did you hear about methane digestion? The initiative about trying to figure out how that's like the solution, because it's been proven that methane gases coming from cows are the major cause now. It's been proven through various papers we've been talking about it on our networks. They didn't talk about it at the Big Cause 26 conference, but they are addressing it with supposedly digestible methane. They're trying to get rid of it. So now they're admitting that it is happening. At least that's good. Every other meat-eating diseases, U.S. government is absolutely okay. Well, we don't think the whole government's corrupt, hopefully, because we hope all is not lost. At least that's my opinion. And I think that I can speak for the network. But anyway, Carol, I would like to go through some of these images, and you have so much background. You've been to the Roundups. Many say they can't bear to go to the Roundups, but you are there bearing witness, and thank you. We want to thank you so much for doing that. We also want to show your amazing work that you do as a photographer. You've written books, and you've also, a lot of the time that you spend is not only taking care of the 2 horses that you've adopted probably because you love them, but as you say, you'd rather see them on the range, but this horrific thing where they're getting into the wrong hands. It's clear that the horses that are being rounded up are getting into the wrong hands. And so, but anyway, let's look at some of your images. I get carried away here. And you can just talk through, and we'll be jumping around a little bit, but you can explain what they are if you would.
So this is sheep that were put out on Salt Walls Creek, which is one of the herds that just got rounded up and 80% of the horses removed. In a drought year, they dumped the sheep out in August at the driest time of the year, and look how many of them there are. I was there when they were released.
Amazing.
This is Bubba. He is a local favorite. He is a curly stallion in Salt Wells Creek, and you can see the curls in his hair.
Yeah.
And curlies are very rare. They're only in 2 herds in Wyoming, Saltwells Creek and White Mountain, both of these herds are being decimated right now. But Bubba was released. In another of my pictures you've been showing, he was released along with 44 other stallions. And this is a genetic thing that the curly horses have, and they are actually hypoallergenic. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. So that's Bubba actually getting out of the trailer, and he's free. And the other horse behind him is Medicine Man. So some of the local people really love these horses. They name them, and you can see they're very happy to get out of those trailers.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But
there was one where you see him just coming out, and he has such an expression on his face of what's, like he's stepping out. Is this really true? I wish I could find it at the moment. Do you know the one I'm talking about, where one of the horses just stepping out of a trailer? And the expression on his face was incredible. I mean, you can tell they're just so happy to get out and get away. I mean, imagine what the experience was for them, and then to be released. You know what I mean? Like they're there being held for no reason. Suddenly a helicopter comes overhead. Some of them die. Their band gets really torn up, broken up. And then suddenly they're in pens, and only a few of them get to go back.
Yes. So even though they were released, they have lost everything. They've lost their family. They've lost their mares. Sometimes mares and stallions have been together for 10 years. They lost their youngsters. This is a stallion in temporary holding. It broke my heart. He was looking at me. He had just been rounded up and brought in. And that other picture you show with the cowboys, they went out and roped the stallion and dragged him in, because the ranchers wanted every single horse gone from that area. And, it's ridiculous. It's dangerous roping a stallion. And the stress on the horses that get roped and pulled in is incredible. And some of the horses, when they are brought in, are incredibly sweaty. They've been run for a very long time. And a lot of times the babies get separated, and they have to go out and rope them and find them. And the Sandwash Roundup that was in August, there were all these foals that were separated from their families because they ran them too fast. And the foals showed up at the holding facility by themselves, or accompanied by a stallion bringing them in, instead of the BLM going and finding them. It's just so wrong to separate these little babies from their mothers.
That's incredible. Go ahead.
And so this is a stallion and mare that actually got away. And during the roundup, they ran right toward me, and you can see how sweaty they are. And it was a very cold, windy day, which tells you they've been running for a long time.
Now, when horses run like that for a long time, from what I understand with very limited knowledge, and they come out of, God forbid, the racetrack, but they're all sweaty, don't they have to be treated, because that state for them is dangerous to begin with, right? So
yes, they're not used to being all sweaty in the winter. And they can get sick. They can colic. Things can happen to them afterwards. And there was actually one mare that came in. No, it was a stallion that came in during the roundup to the pens and just collapsed and died.
Oh my gosh.
The stress on these animals that are not used to being handled, they're not used to being captured, is immense. And it's so sad seeing them there. And that's not the way things should be. And, when the whole principle of the helicopter roundup is you are terrifying a horse into running so that you can capture them in a trap. So it is very inhumane.
It's brutal, and there's no reason for it. And the fact that the horses, for those people that don't know about the free roaming Wild Horse and Barrow Act, could you talk about that in terms of how the land isn't even really supposed to go to the cattle ranchers to begin with? and how much they've taken. Can you address that for us?
Well, so the 1971 Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act designated the lands that the horses were currently on at the time the act was passed as being lands where the horses should be managed as the principal species. And that is not happening because of livestock grazing. And the horses have lost 24 million acres that used to belong to them, the herds have been zeroed out. And so, and as I said, we are in danger of losing 3 more herds in the next couple of years in Wyoming. And Montana used to have a lot of wild horse herds, and now there's just one, the Pryor Mountain herd. So
wow.
These areas just get zeroed out by pressure from the ranchers. And those are 2 mares in the holding facility, and they're together, but it's so depressing. It's no kind of life for a horse. It's no kind of life for a wild horse that's used to being on the range. And
exactly.
And look how beautiful they are. Look how healthy they are. They're not starving to death. This is the narrative the BLM gives us all the time. They're starving. We need to remove them for their own good. Do those horses look like they're starving?
They look magnificent. They look magnificent.
Yeah. And unfortunately, some of the holding facilities are really horrific. So there were 1,200 horses that went to Canyon City last year. And they were there for almost a year before we were able to go in and adopt them. And when I went in there, I was horrified because these mares that had been healthy and fat when they came in were starving and skinny. And the yearlings,
now were they may have been fed, but just not eating? Is that, yeah.
No, they weren't being fed. They weren't being fed enough. And especially the mares who had foals. Many had lost their foals because they didn't have enough calories. And some of them looked like skeletons, and the yearlings looked terrible. So I adopted in August a yearling named Helios that I had known on the range, and he was skin and bones when I got him. And there's no reason for young horses to be starved like that. And that facility is managed by the BLM, and they didn't let us in. They were claiming COVID, even though the facility is outdoors, corrals outdoors. I don't know how, that could be an issue. And we had a couple of news crews went in and made a big fuss about that the horses were not being fed enough.
So this has been documented and covered on the news. I just want to explain that to people. And we do invite that facility on at any time to corroborate, tell us their side of the story. We don't have any proof of what you just said. Personally, I haven't gotten that data, so I just want to throw that in there. But I'm sure what you're saying is accurate. We just have to put that out there and invite them on. So go ahead, Carol.
So I went back into the facility 3 weeks ago, and there was much more food available for the horses, and the horses looked much better. So they are caring for them better than they were.
Well, I think that's a good example of us staying on top of this, the public, but really taking action. I mean, this is the best time of the year. Is there someone that you're getting, or is there a gift that you can do without, or is there something that you can show your love for the horses? And by the way, Carol, I want to mention your 2 websites that you have. The Wild Hoofbeats. Tell us the difference between, I'm a little still myself confused. Wild Hoofbeats, what will people find on this website?
So the Wild Hoofbeats website is actually the home of my blog, which is an education blog about wild horses. I will post about what's happening to the Wyoming herds, what's happening with the Roundups, what's happening, also alerts, news alerts, so people can find out what to comment and where. So that's on that website. So it's basically about educating people about wild horses. The other website is my fine art website, which is where I sell prints and things. So that's the difference between the 2 websites.
Now on the fine art site, because it is coming around to Christmas time, people can go on there. Do you also have framed artwork, or is it, how do you sell your prints? Can you just talk about that for a moment? And are these pictures that we see available, or they go to the website and see all the pictures that are available on your personal website, the other one that we had up, Living Images, this one?
So some of these images are available. And yes, people can buy images as prints. They can get them framed. They can get metal prints, acrylic prints, wood prints. So I offer a lot of options for people.
That's amazing. So that's another great gift you can give. And supporting Carol, of course, supports the animals. You spend so much of your time following these cases. You have a lawsuit you're involved in. You are so dedicated. Carol, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been involved? I know that everyone that I talked to said you must interview Carol Walker. She's been at it such a long time. She's an expert. She knows what she's talking about. Not that I ever doubted it, but how did you get involved? Tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind. Go ahead.
So in 2000, I started my horse photography business and started doing that full time. And a friend said to me, so why aren't you photographing wild horses? And I said, wild horses? I don't know about them. Well, I don't know about wild horses. A week later, I got an invitation to photograph wild horses in Wyoming to go with someone who was doing a photography trip. And I went out to Adobe Town. That was my very first time. And I saw these horses out in the wild, and they were amazing. They were so well suited to the land. And I saw this little family in the distance, and all I saw was ears sticking up over the sagebrush, and they were taking their mid-morning nap. And the stallion jumps up and starts running toward me, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And then his filly comes up, stands next to him, and she looks like she's grinning. And I was immediately in love with these horses and started going and visiting them once a month, spending about a week at a time. And then I heard that this herd, Adobe Town, was going to be most rounded up and most of the horses removed. And I was absolutely heartbroken. And I went to the roundup. And when I saw what was happening to these horses, they were getting sent to these holding facilities. They were separated from their families. I said, I got to do something. I got to help these horses. I've got to get the word out. They're not starving to death. They don't need to be removed. They're healthy and they're magnificent. And people need to see the spirit of these beautiful animals. So I did my first book, Wild Hoofbeats, about these horses. And I started being an advocate for them and speaking out and letting people know what's going on and how they could help. And I really thought that we would save the wild horses in 3 or 4 years. And that was in 2005. So here it is, 2021, and the situation facing wild horses is more dire than ever it has been before. But the good news is many more people are involved. So many thousands of people across the country and across the world care about our wild horses and are taking action to help them. And I think that if they hadn't, they would all be gone by now.
They'd all be gone already, you think, huh?
Yes.
Oh my goodness, Carol, that is so disturbing. This is so incredible. I mean, why? It's like bothering the most gentle creature in the world. Why would anyone want to do that? Where's their heart? Where's their heart? Where's their soul? What are they? You know, this is not a disposable item.
I highly recommend everyone get out and go see wild horses while we still have them.
Wow, that's sad.
They're on public lands. So these are our lands. These are our horses, and they deserve to live wild and free. And there is nothing more amazing than going out and sitting with groups of horses and observing them interact. They don't just sit there and graze. They have relationships, the stallions and the mares, the bachelor stallions that all hang out together and run around and cause trouble. And then you'll see the older stallions lose their families to the younger stallions coming up. It's really like a soap opera, actually.
Wow.
Horses. And over time,
well, what happens to the ones that lose their families?
Usually the older stallions, they maybe last a year or two after they lose their family because, you know, they've kind of lost their purpose in life. But it's the cycle of life. I would rather see these horses die on the range,
yes,
being in these horrible holding facilities with no when you see them there, there's like no light left in their eyes. I mean, it's the saddest thing that I can imagine. Look how proud that stallion is. He is amazing. And this was a day before he got removed.
Oh my
I watched
gosh.
him and his family get rounded up.
Oh
And
my gosh.
that is my new yearling Helios. And I got him in August, and he's been at a friend who's been gentling him for me. And he's an amazing boy. And I've known him since he was born in May of last year.
Oh, what a gift.
Yes.
Sad though.
He's a
So
gift.
sad what they're doing. Oh, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. As much as you love your horses, you would much rather. Carol, let me ask you, how do you feel about horseback riding?
Oh, I used to ride. So,
because some people say that we shouldn't ride, and I guess everybody makes up their own mind. I was just curious.
So
I don't ride. I tried once and I fell off.
Yeah, I rode starting when I was 6 years old. I've owned horses since I was 12, and I used to compete and show and ride and trail ride and do all that stuff. I haven't been riding for about 7 years now. But I still own horses, and I love horses. And
what do you say to
ride them. I don't have to ride them to have a relationship with them.
Right, exactly. That's what a lot of people feel, and that they really don't have the right. I guess some people say that some horses enjoy being ridden. I really don't know. You know, I am totally ignorant on the subject. All I can say is would never want to see an animal forced to do something against their will. That's how I feel. And if I knew that was true, I'd be against horseback riding.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Horses should never be mistreated. That is for certain.
Yeah.
But I don't consider wild horses to be saddle horses in waiting. You know, wild horses belong in the wild on the range. They are not, sometimes many of these horses, when people adopt them, they don't make good candidates as riding horses. Some of them just cannot deal with being ridden or, and a lot of them
wind up in slaughterhouses because of that.
Before
we're almost out of time. We only have a few minutes. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to wrap up whatever you want to say, but can you just go a little bit into how's the situation, since so many people have complained about the slaughterhouses and become aware, and it's been all over the news media. Not as much as we'd like to see, but thankfully it has been covered. What's happening now with that? Is anything being cracked down on with that? I mean, do you have any information?
Well, we don't have slaughterhouses in this country.
Right. But I mean, it going through the network, are they cracking down on it?
No, they're still going to Mexico and being slaughtered. So that needs to stop. And we also have, as I said, 60,000 wild horses in holding facilities. And it would be very easy for the BLM to justify killing all of them because they're expensive to house. And that's what I'm really concerned about. I'm concerned they would do euthanasia at the holding facilities. And it would be an incredible tragedy to see all of these healthy wild horses killed because of convenience.
Well, we are going to stay on top of this story. And I know thankfully, as you had said, the good news is that there are a lot of people following this story. They are on it, and they're not going to let this go away without a lot of noise and a lot of, protest against it. And hopefully we're hoping that will save the horses. We are actually down to just a few minutes left for the broadcast. So if there's anything you want to say, this would be a good time to do that, to wrap it up.
So another organization that I recommend supporting, because they have recently taken some horses that I really cared about, is Skydog Sanctuary. And they have rescued a lot of these horses that were in the AIP, the Adoption Incentive Program, that ended up at kill buyers. And they've rescued a lot of those horses. They took a family with a stallion named Blue Zeus and took the entire family and reunited them at their sanctuary. So sanctuaries do tremendous work taking in horses that would end up being slaughtered otherwise. or in bad situations. So that is something that I really want people to be aware of. And wild horses are really a part of our country from the beginning, and they deserve to live their lives free. And we should be able to, and our children and our grandchildren should be able to go visit them on our public lands. They should be maintained at a population where they're sustainable and they can live free. And that's really what I want to see.
Right. We have a question here. California herds, not that
Yes.
there
Yes.
are. Okay.
Yes, there are a bunch of wild horses in California. Absolutely. If you Google BLM California wild horses, you'll find them.
Well, there you go. I haven't heard. So they're not rounding up there yet? I don't even want to mention them.
Oh, they've been rounding up in all of the states.
They've been rounding them up, and it's
There are 10 Western states, and they are pretty much going after all of them right now.
in the 10 Western states. Right. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been a very informative hour. Not all good news, some good news. We do have something that you can do. We always on this show try to give you an actionable item, and that is, first of all, if you can, I know it's a rough for some people right now are going through hard times. If you can donate any amount, helps. Imagine if we all just gave a cup of left behind a cup of Starbucks coffee or whatever we do to treat ourselves, and just send a little donation. That would be great. But the other thing you can do that's very powerful is sign the petition. And we were going to be putting this links right when I get off. I'll put up the links for you guys. So please, and Carol, how can they get in touch with you? Would you like them to go to the websites we've shown? Wild Hoof Beats?
They can go to either website, and there's a contact form, and all my information to contact me is there.
And you are constantly putting up posts with new information, and people can comment on the post as well and ask you questions there as well. And if anybody wants a Christmas present for a family member, think about getting a beautiful piece of artwork. Wouldn't that be incredible? And the story behind it. You know, I mean, I hope I'm going to actually be getting some, and I'm going to talk to you about that. But I hope the ones that I pick aren't being round up or never get round up, or I hope none of them do for that matter.
Right.
So unless you have anything else you want to say, I'm going to wrap it up for today, folks.
Great.
Okay. Thanks for being on, Carol. And folks, thanks for tuning in. Look for those links. They'll be up in just a few moments. Bye-bye now.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.